This video is sponsored by Crimson Manifesto and Knuckles OX. Before we begin, please be sure to do all the usual YouTube stuff like liking, subscribing, and commenting, since all are great ways to support the channel and its content. Please enjoy the show. As Bulma and Pigero make their way back to Guru's place, having gotten their hands on the Dragon Balls, the blue-haired scientist regards the young man pensively. A little put off by this scrutiny, Pigero asks if he's got something on his face. With a sigh, Bulma replies no, it's just that he's not at all how she thought he'd be, praising him as a well-mannered and sweet kid like Gohan. Furrowing his brows slightly, Pigero inquires in what regard she means, and with surety only privilege can buy, Bulma answers that when she heard he was some street rat Piccolo picked up and trained to fight the Saiyans, she thought he'd be just as ruthless as the demon. But he's not. He even spared that green guy back there when there was no reason to. He's nothing like Piccolo. Shaking his head, Pigero replies that she really must not know his master well, as the Namekian is a far better man than she gives him credit for. Perhaps the best he's ever known, even if he does attempt to hide his heart behind his stony mask of indifference. Such faith in the villain gives Bulma pause, though when she looks at the boy once again, she notices his halting speech is not to make a point, but rather because he is frozen, a look of shock and horror on his face. Before she can even ask what's wrong, Pigero is already in the air, urging her to finish the job while he deals with what's following them. Furiously, Bulma protests this, as Pigero is still a child technically, but this only gives the incoming enemies a chance to draw near, revealing themselves to be Burter and Jace, two opponents much more ferocious than Zarbon, with their scouters having picked up the fight with Frieza's head attendant. And now, Pigero's exact location thanks to his hasty decision of taking flight. Realizing that he has inadvertently led the bad guy straight to them, Pigero is forced to use a bit of skullduggery to protect Bulma, employing first Master Tien's Solar Flare, followed closely by Master Yamcha's Spirit Ball to destroy the enemy scouters. Then, as an extra precaution, he resorts to a bit of good old-fashioned dirt kicking, blasting the ground so that the grit sprays into the air, covering Bulma's retreat. Upset by the rudeness, Burter offers to clear away the smoke so that Jace doesn't dirty his beautiful hair, an offer the red-skinned Brinch is happy to accept, calling Burter a true blue mate, while he volunteers to go after the Shield of Fling with Lord Frieza's Dragon Balls. That is until he sees what Pigero has done, as now instead of facing one young man, the pair of Ginyus are facing 10, each of whom scowl furiously at the aliens as they create another set of dust clouds. Though the multi-form technique has cut his power into tens, by employing the guerrilla tactics he picked up from the run of Zeshin's crew, Pigero is just able to keep his advantage by leading these idiots away from Bulma. That is until a Purple Comet Crash team attack carrying the speed of the self-proclaimed fastest in the universe and the strength of the red magma strikes the clones all at once, slamming them one after another back into the original. Suddenly, the tables are turned after having drawn the battle out once again, as now Pigero is out in the open, facing down two of Frieza's strongest men, and to make matters worse, he must do so alone. Meanwhile, over with Ginyu and Vegeta, the not-so-good captain has just put a fist-sized hole in his own esophagus, much to the confusion of all assembled. However, this is simply step one of his dastardly scheme, as when he is sure his body is sufficiently damaged, he throws his arms wide, declaring change now. Having no concept of this attack due to its highly secret nature, Vegeta merely assumes it is some sort of kamikaze move, and if such, no matter, as with his superior strength, he will be able to shrug off whatever this oaf throws at him. In spite of himself, Whis shares this confidence, believing that Vegeta has all but won, and so prepares himself for another round of obsequious butt-kissing. That is until he notices something odd about Vegeta, having up until recently been his rival. The fish-faced alien has had plenty of chances to study the Saiyan up close, and something in his demeanor is distinctly off. Having a hunch what this might be from the sudden flamboyance emanating from Vegeta's stance, Whis goes to test this theory, first selling his obliviousness by cruelly blasting the dying body of Ginyu, then going to stand by Vegeta's side. Up close, it is very clear that this is not Vegeta, but before he can do anything more, the imposter Vegeta requests Whis' scouter, stating that he'd like to scan Ginyu's power as he dies in a passable imitation of the Prince's bravado. But knowing that the person inside Vegeta's body will kill him the second he gets the scouter, Whis resorts to an oldie but a goodie, taking off the scouter and beginning to hand it over, only to drop to his knees with an exclamation of shock as he greets Lord Frieza. Spinning on the spot, Vegeta's body flamboyantly genuflects, revealing himself as really Ginyu and promising to do his dance of greeting as proof, only to be stunned when he sees no one there. However, this is nothing to the shock he receives when he is assailed from behind by Whis. Channeling all his power, the purple alien strikes Ginyu in the back with a key orb, having gotten rather good at determining the vulnerable points on Vegeta's body. But before he can launch another, the captain proves why he is the leader of Frieza's executive-level soldiers, whipping out a hand and crushing Whis. Letting out a cry of pain, the fish-faced schemer falls to his knees, his brief bravery being replaced by its usual cowardice as he begs Ginyu for mercy. Though in a strange quirk of fate, this provides the captain with the very ego boost which will be his undoing. Clamping down hard on Whis' hand, Ginyu lets his guard down, and mockingly declares that his power might even be greater than it was before, since on top of Vegeta's strength, he also now has that famed Saiyan warrior biology. As he says this, Qui gets an idea. If Ginyu has the benefits of Vegeta's Saiyan physiology, he should also have the weaknesses. Looking between the captain's legs, Qui sees that he's in luck, as in his relaxed state, Ginyu has allowed his tail to unfurl, leaving it in a perfect range for him to reach out and grab. At once, the body of Vegeta goes limp, all power drained in an instant, and as Ginyu topples over, Qui does not waste a second, kicking dirt in his face and jeering that he's not so tough now. From behind him, the real Vegeta then speaks up, his breathing ragged due to the grievous injury Ginyu gave his old shell on the way out. In a vaguely approving voice, he admits that Qui's strategy was a bold one, since if his tail conditioning had been physical rather than mental, that never would have worked, and Ginyu probably would have assumed that it was an attack and blown him away. At once, the purple-skinned underling goes pale, sputtering in a way that tells Vegeta Qui had no idea how tenuous his plan had been when he executed it. Not that it matters, as now they have Ginyu at their mercy, meaning all they have to do is keep him helpless until they can force him to change back. Unfortunately, as the saying goes, you can't keep a bad Ginyu down, as even with most of his strength sapped, something of Vegeta's iron will has been ingrained in his body, with it quickly gaining enough strength to launch one last desperate attack as it lunges at Qui. Knowing they are doomed if the moronic mollusk loses his hold on the tail, Vegeta intercepts the hit, grappling with his former body, and beginning a round of punches and kicks while yelling at Qui not to let go no matter what. This is a surprisingly even fight, as while Ginyu can only use a fraction of the fraction of Vegeta's strength he was already using, Vegeta in Ginyu's body is also facing a similar problem, that being his body is dying. Choosing to gamble on his old form giving out before Vegeta can kill his new one, Ginyu refuses to change back. That is, until a sharpened stake the size of a man materialized in Ginyu's stolen chest. Looking round, Vegeta, Ginyu, and Qui find the culprit to be none other than a disgustingly sweaty Guldo, the pudgy green fighter having thought he was protecting his captain. Gurgling a laugh, Vegeta mockingly asks what Ginyu plans to do now, as it seems he's doomed either way. Though ever the opportunist, Ginyu makes one last desperate play, changing back to his in relatively better shaped body, while hoping that with Guldo here, his subordinate can carry him to a healing chamber before he bleeds out or asphyxiates. This is a theoretically good plan, though it fails to take into account one thing, that as soon as Vegeta is back in his own body, he commands Qui with a one-track mind to release his tail, allowing him to regain a portion of his strength and quite literally punch Ginyu's head off. As Qui nervously pulls Guldo's pesky splinter from out of his chest, Vegeta next turns his attention to the green alien, who watches from the sidelines, horrified that even his best efforts could not save his captain. Growling maliciously, the Saiyan Prince informs Guldo that he now has a choice to make, bow down to him or die by his hand. Once, Guldo would have refused, seeing Vegeta as little more than a glorified grunt, but after seeing him do away with Ginyu, along with Rakun's death being fresh in his mind, he decides that the best course of action is to lick the Saiyan's boot rather than be crushed under it. Such cowardice disgusts Vegeta, but before he can kick the four-eyed wretch, fatigue and bloodlust finally catch up to him, making the Saiyan keel over, unconscious. Panicked, Qui rushes over to check Vegeta's vitals, not out of any loyalty mind you, but because the Saiyan is his meal ticket, he and this strange drive for cooperation he'd returned from the Earth with. So needless to say, if he croaks, Qui knows he'll likely end up court-martialed for betraying Frieza, or more likely, just vaporized. This clues Guldo into the fact that he's apparently just signed himself onto a coup as well, and in panic, agrees with Qui that they better make sure Vegeta gets his chance to prove he isn't all talk. Thankfully, he has just the tools for the job. Returning to Nail and Guru, the duo are in the midst of hearing out the will of the alien Guardian's children, hearing that by this point, most feel it is best they accept the Earthlings' invitation to take refuge on their planet, and so now, the group's efforts have turned towards convincing their father and greater protector to accompany them. However, it is with a heavy and weary heart that Guru admits he is resolved to see this conflict through to the very end of the planet itself if so be it, as long as it is necessary to carry out the wishes of their allies. As such, he promptly appoints Muri as the new Grand Elder, asking Nail to now do his duty to the future of their people rather than an old dying man. But mirroring his father in both speech and action, he instantly determines to remain with him to care for him until the end. And knowing his father is too weak to now protest his stubbornness, he himself appoints the newly created Super Namekian Ganga as Grand Elder Muri's attendant. It is at this moment that said Namekian returns to tend Shinhan and Yamcha a lot harder on his trail than they had been when they set out only a few hours earlier that day. The trio instantly erasing their energy and stressing that the survivors had to evacuate and take shelter in one of the already ransacked villages until they can get the Dragon Balls. Since they'd gotten the opportunity to do some recon and figure out the path the enemy leader Frieza and his spiky pink general had taken, all thanks to Tien's potential unleashing helping him to achieve a new key-enhanced sight beyond sight that allowed him to see the tyrant's movements and intentions slightly before they actually happened. Still, both Earthlings are shocked to find that both Pigero and Bulma are gone, only now reaching out to send the scientists and their young charge's key. Thankfully finding the former fine, however seemingly stationary and scared more than likely, while Pigero is definitely fighting two people about Nail's power at once. Or more accurately, running from them, though by the looks of his fading ki, he wouldn't be holding up for much longer. As the Namekians begin to file out and move as quickly and discreetly as possible, Ganga is informed of Nail's decision, just as Yamcha impatiently demands an explanation. seeing Nail grimly fill them in on Piccolo's scheme and Bulma's desire to watch over him. But as the two begin to go back and forth about what duty is greater, Gonga shockingly refuses Nail's offer, simply stating that there will be young Namekian warriors in the future like Cargo, who can go to protect Elder Muri. Just as everyone notices that said boy and his older brother Dende had actually stuck back as their brethren left, Gonga smiling at their bravery and stating his wanting to embrace fear and use this power to stand up against the great evil. Mulling this over, Guru calls the children over to him, revealing he likely wouldn't survive moving from this place to escape the tyrant anyway. But even so, he is inspired by his children, and so unleashes both their potential, instructing them to accompany the Earthlings to help them with their wishes. With their faith renewed, the two Earthlings decide to carry the children as they bolt off full speed to try and help their friends. At the same time, finally entering Namek's atmosphere a good bit later, the Capsule Corp ship team begins their approach to the sieged planet. And thus, as Gohan and his father finish the Tai Chi forms they had been practicing to center his anger and power, they feel Piccolo's ki growing weaker as well, not to mention noticing the major players still on the battlefield. As for the orphan fighter, this fading is actually thanks to a rather risky strategy the youngster had resorted to for survival, and the recognition that he was simply outmanned and outgunned, allowing himself to be grazed by a crusher ball convincingly enough that he can escape into the waters of Namek, sinking as low as the excrement of the whales on the planet, in hopes that his pursuers will buy the cheap shot on the weaker opponent. But as he feels the terrain shake and rumble a bit more, he can tell he's hurt someone's pride. They're likely deciding to destroy the surrounding area for a bit in case he scampered off. However, by the time the shaking stops, Piccolo's air is used up, and desperately, he begins to panic, knowing whether underneath the water or overwhelming power, death is near. But it is in this moment that he takes heed of all the lessons he has learned so far in his short life, especially the two his proudly self-proclaimed adopted father and master had taught him. Number 1. Even in the midst of absolute hell, and no matter how intense the emotion, it's always okay to fight with your head and your heart. And number 2, the things you do for others come back around for you. So with an otherworldly faith in these lessons and an unknowingly amount of rapid growth, he somehow gains an almost inherent understanding of the element manipulation technique he'd been attempting on fake Namek, using this to clumsily create a few breaths for himself so he can launch a gutsy last gamble, spamming a volley of ki blasts and attempting the high-level ki control master Yamcha tried to show him. Using these to distract his attackers, giving him an opening to burst from the ocean depths with a spiral of water following him that slams into a blindsided Jace. Giving Piccolo a couple of critical cheap shots on him before swinging him in a dragon throw by all that hair, throwing him wildly. Sick of this, Burner is able to chase him down with a little more trouble than he had earlier, before spearing him down to the ground with a kick. Though this takes his well-earned second win from him, Piccolo reuses the collapsing of his body to clap his hands together and bring the rain of ki blasts that at first seemed to miss uselessly crashing down on a still woozy Jace, traumatizing Burner as he's forced to watch his buddy battered down and burned to a pulp by the ambush. Thus, as Piccolo tries to crawl away to get back to his feet and fight again, Burner resolves to give him what for his mate, and so hails down high-speed blows on the already beaten Earthling. And this proves to be his last conscious decision, as a moment later, a small blur zips past him and delivers a slight bonk to his head that renders him unconscious. Skidding to a halt beside Piccolo, the little blur reveals himself to be Gohan, feeling to Piccolo like a whole new person, though this is hardly the time for questions, as his little friend desperately shoves the senzu bean meant for him to recover from his training into Piccolo's mouth, assuring him that he'd be okay now. Though his body rapidly heals from this, Piccolo remains in shock for a few moments longer, and so using this time to get the elder boy up to speed, Gohan explains that he, his dad, and Yajirobe all split up. But this troubles Piccolo, who tells Gohan that now is not the time for that, since right now they need to be reconvening so they can make their wish, now that they got all the Dragon Balls that is. But more than that, they can't risk moving around carelessly, since there are a lot of bad guys on the planet still, who are currently hunting them all, and all of whom are orders of magnitude stronger than Vegeta. Speaking of Vegeta, he is currently inside a healing pod, since thanks to Guro's time stop, he and Kui were able to get him back to Frieza's ship before he bled out. Now he lies immobile while in the corridor, Kui and Guro pace nervously. Thanks to their scouters, they can sense that several new power levels have arrived on the planet, each of which dwarfs their own, being roughly comparable to Vegeta's. Not to mention, Frieza is still out there with Dodoria, meaning they have enemies on all sides, and the only thing protecting the two of them from all those dangers is currently out of commission. Simply speaking, things couldn't be worse. Even attempting to flee would be pointless, since unlike those Earthlings, they don't know how to suppress their powers, so sooner or later, whoever comes out of this whole mess victorious will hunt them down for double-crossing them. Their only hope of survival is to play it smart, which means supporting Vegeta in whatever way they can. A highly odious prospect, but a wise one, as he is the only person on this rock who doesn't want them dead. However, this doesn't mean he especially values their lives either, which tells the two minions that they need a fallback plan. To this end, the pair make a pact that if things somehow go even more sideways than they are now, they'll have each other's backs, their mutual cowardice making this the first trustworthy thing either has heard since arriving on Namek. Meanwhile, another coward is shoring up his own insurance policy, that being Yajirobe, as he sneaks his way under Frieza's ship, figuring that with all the big scary powers hunting the other Earthlings out there, no one would bother him back at their own HQ. Scouting around, he sees that the coast is clear of any of the big fish in the pond, and so slips on board, his fourth port of call being the galley. Unfortunately for him, his presence is not lost on Qui and Guldo, the pair of underlings working to jump him. Using Guldo's time skip, they are able to sneak up on the Pudgy Rogue, though when they go to attack him, Yajirobe's self-preservation instincts kick in, with him briefly displaying the true power he gained through his training and knocking the pair of aliens through several walls, just barely leaving the hull intact. Shocked by this strength from a mere Earthling, Qui and Guldo are left reeling as a result, though to their surprise, the human does not press his advantage, instead simply plopping himself back down and continuing to eat his way through their provisions. A decision neither of the Frieza Force defectors have any complaints about, as they decide to give this guy a wide berth until Vegeta wakes up. Returning to Frieza and Dodoria, they have just arrived at Guru's place, having sensed a rise in power that they want to make sure is not Vegeta. Not to mention, said power could arguably rival his own. Such a thing cannot be allowed, and so the duo find themselves touching down the plateau outside the palace. To their surprise, their intended victim makes no attempt to hide himself. In fact, he willingly comes out to meet them, with another one of his fellow Namekian vermin by his side. In a tone that suggests they believe they hold power in this situation, the pair of slugs order Frieza and his lackey to leave. But this only incenses the Emperor, with him ordering Dodoria to show these two what happens when they don't show Lord Frieza the proper respect. Dodoria tries, Dodoria dies, with a single blast from Gonga reducing the spiky pink alien to dust in no time flat. By now, Frieza is positively livid, barely able to believe that he's being forced to dirty his own hands. But he supposes, like the old adage goes, if you want something eviscerated right, do it yourself. Suddenly, things are no longer so clearly in the Namekians' favor, as when Frieza throws himself at the pair, the best they can do is hold him off in exchange for a severe beating. Gonga, as the one in front, takes the worst pummeling, with Frieza taking sadistic delight in torturing him. Knowing that even his power is not enough, the Super Namekian reveals his real reason for staying, and offers his life just as those who fused to form him did, with Nail taking the will, hope, and rage of Namek into himself with no hesitation. In a flash, Gonga is gone, and as Nail steps up to take his place, Frieza is shocked to discover a power level of 600,000. However, Nail is not the only one surprises, as when the warrior Namekian rushes forward to deliver a series of satisfying blows to Frieza's face and torso, destroying his hover chair and pushing him back away from Guru's, the tyrant endures and begins a metamorphosis of his own, growing twice his former size and more than twice his former power. Once more, the alien overlord is in the driver's seat, as he demonstrates the full power this form provides, grabbing Nail with his tail then hurling him into the air for a round of skeet shooting. But defiantly, Super Nail holds on, even managing to retaliate with a ki blast of his own, and while this does scorch the bio armor on Frieza's shoulders, it comes at a high price, as the enraged Emperor gorges him with his horns, intentionally aiming for a vital point and gleefully jumping around to exacerbate the wound. Coughing up purple blood, Nail collapses to the ground, his expression determined even on the brink of death. Though even now, Frieza is not done with him, wrapping his tail around the hero's throat and throwing him through the wall of Guru's home. Stepping in after him, the tyrant plants a foot on Nail's head, growling that he hopes the slug is proud of himself. He will be the last person to ever harm him, as he shall soon possess a perfect immortal body. Though to his surprise, this simply makes Nail laugh, even underfoot, stating that Frieza shouldn't count his wishes before they're granted, as he is simply the guardian to the Elder tied to the orbs he sinks, meaning attacking him will backfire. And while he's been buying time fighting the tyrant, the Earthlings have acquired all the Dragon Balls and the password, meaning Frieza's ambitions of immortality have all gone up in smoke. Letting out a roar of rage, Frieza does not even bother to finish off his kill, instead taking off at top speed. After all his hard work, he will not be denied by the efforts of some lowly slugs and their Earthling worm allies. No, he will still have his wish, even if it means razing this pathetic mudball to the ground. So broadcasting on all channels, Frieza orders all his remaining forces to converge on the ship, so that they may begin a full-scale planetary search for the Earthlings and the Dragon Balls. Among those received this message are Qui and Guldo in the control room, with a few remaining techs and reserves, who understandably panic, considering that they are now right in the path of a furious Frieza. The sound of their panic is even enough to draw the attention of both Yajirobe and a mostly recovered Vegeta, with both grumpily stomping over to see what all the ruckus is about, and thus angrily swatting away the few brave randos who try to jump them both. This results in a tense meeting. As though they never met in combat, they recognize the other from the battle on Earth. But before it can come to blows, Qui and Guldo relay the news of Frieza's imminent arrival. This makes Yajirobe blanch worse than the sight of Vegeta did, as now his safe little hidey hole is about to become a battlefield. And to make matters worse, as he proposes running, the Frieza Force defectors inform him this won't help, as Frieza is now hunting Earthlings, so nowhere on Namek will be safe for him. Laughing at the Ronin's evident terror, Vegeta taunts that it seems his luck's run out, though here Guldo makes a rather salient point. That as traitors to the tyrant, they're in the exact same boat, so maybe they ought to team up with this guy, since he's pretty strong. Liking the idea of more meat shields, Yajirobe jumps at this prospect, stating that he can bring them back to Goku, since he'll be with the others about to make their wish on the Dragon Balls now. Face darkening, Vegeta growls that he will not let the Earthlings or that soft-hearted Lowborn have his wish, declaring that he will agree to this alliance, but only under the proviso that this wish be used to make him immortal. Smiling widely, Yajirobe agrees, figuring that they can use him and his cronies to fight this Frieza guy for them. And then, just have Goku and Gohan take them down afterwards like last time, while they keep the wish all for themselves. And so it is that Yajirobe takes point as they abandon the ship, guiding Vegeta's team to the other location while many miles away the rest of the Dragon team assemble to make their wish. Arriving with Dende and Cargo, Yamcha and Tenshinhan are pleased to see that those energy signatures they felt before were Goku and Gohan. Though the pair of humans are surprised with how much the two have grown in such a short time. Bulma is also relieved to see her oldest friend again, as well as that Gohan and Pigero are unharmed when they arrive not long after him. Thanks to the two young Namekians, there is no uncertainty as to how to summon the dragon, with Dende reciting the words Lord Guru taught him to bring forth Porunga. Ever the optimist, Goku's first thought is to wish back everyone killed by the Saiyans. Though to his dismay, he is informed by Cargo that Porunga can only revive one person at a time, though in exchange, they will receive 3 wishes. Being a clever young man, Pigero suggests they should wish back Master Piccolo, since this will also revive Kami and the Earth's Dragon Balls. Hearing no complaints, Dende recites this Porunga, then smiles, and a moment later, the Eternal Dragon informs him the Namekian's return. Though now is a chance to get back Krillin and Chaozu as well, the second wish is also an easy one. As with no knowledge of Yajirobe's bargain with Vegeta, the team requests that Piccolo be brought to Namek as an extra ally in the fight with Frieza, despite the risk, with the Namekian seconding this plan from the other world, confident in his gains. Unfortunately, due to a lack of specificity in their wording, Piccolo is brought to the planet, just not to them, instead appearing inside Guru's house. However, this is not the only misfortune to befall the heroes, as moments after Piccolo's arrival randomly on the planet, Guru departs to the next life, the exertion of unlocking several extra potentials speeding up the passing. With him go Porunga, the Dragon Balls, and the Earthlings hope for a final wish, and as the ancient wish orbs clatter to the ground, now nothing more than boulders, Pigero can't help but feel crestfallen, taking this explicit failure the last part of his mission. Thankfully, Gohan is there to comfort his best friend, telling him to approach this practically, like Mr. Piccolo would, since they can always revive the others when they get back home, including everyone lost here on Namek. However, this is all predicated on the idea that they can get home, a prospect which grows ever more unlikely, as at that moment, Vegeta touches down before them, his eyes locked on the inert Dragon Balls. In fact, the only thing that prevents him from attempting to murder Earth's heroes right this second is the arrival of an equally apoplectic figure who also has eyes only for the Dragon Balls. Second form, Frieza. Suddenly, all cops to the personal grudges among the Z fighters and Vegeta's crew are erased, as their only priority becomes to survive against a being whose fury is matched only by his brutality. As the strongest among them, Vegeta and Goku step up to fight first, telling their allies to stand back, since it'll be easier to go all out knowing that they don't have to avoid hitting them. At first, the two Saiyans are also averse to the idea of fighting side by side, not for personal reasons, but because both are more accustomed and have more fun fighting alone. However, it quickly becomes clear that alone neither would stand a chance against second form Frieza, with their combined effort barely being enough to hold the tyrant back. That is, unless they strain themselves. Unfortunately, things do not get better as they resort to tricks like the Kaioken and Uzaru transformations, as while they give them much needed power increases, their lack of synchronicity makes them effectively only 1/3 as useful as they could be with a united front, seeing Frieza transform once again and removing these options by ridding Goku with holes and ripping off Vegeta's tail telekinetically to strangle him with it, making it so he knows how Namek felt, with it falling to the weaker fighters led by Gohan like Yamcha and even Goro to provide momentary assists that keep the Saiyans in the fight. However, just when it seems like Goku and Vegeta cannot fight for a moment longer, a new warrior enters the battlefield, Piccolo, his cape flapping majestically behind him, and his power far greater than anyone could have imagined. Due to arriving at Guru's place, Piccolo was able to fuse with the dying Super Nail, with the result being an incredible power that puts third form Frieza to shame. Suddenly, the momentum is back on the hero's side, as after a few good hits from Piccolo as payback for both Gonga and Nail, the Super Namekian rallies the two Saiyans for one last finishing blow. Though again, the synchronicity is a tad off, so the special beam cannon, Gallic gun, and Kamehameha rain down upon Frieza slightly off timing, yet still seem to do the trick all the same, with the other fighters like Tien, Yamcha, and Yajirobe all adding in their own attacks for good measure, with a second salvo of the Tri-Beam, Spirit Ball, and Kablam Slicer, all hitting the Tyrant, followed by others from Vegeta's faction spamming Ki Blast, including a late to the party Zarbon and Berta, being forced into joining the coup when Frieza rebutted their pleas for mercy. When the smoke clears, nothing remains but a crater, the mark of a job well done. Relinquishing their fighting stances, the assembled warriors all let out a collective sigh of relief that Frieza is no longer a threat to the universe. That is, until a death beam rips through Piccolo's back before two more winged Vegeta and Goku, putting them all down for the count. Looking in the direction of the shots, the heroes spot Frieza perched on a nearby Mesa, now in his final form, and as he looks back at them, a maniacal cackle bursts from his lips. floating towards them with casualness only absolute dominance can provide. The Galactic Emperor hisses that those two monkeys and their friend the Super Slug almost gave him a real challenge, though he's afraid almost simply doesn't cut it in a fight like this. Something the Namekian can attest to, or rather could have were he still alive. Now the only question remains is what entertaining ways can he come up with to exterminate the rest of them that will make up for him losing immortality. Bunching up, the warriors wreck their brains for any Hail Mary gambits that might still have up their sleeves, with each pushing themselves to the limit just to hold Frieza back a second longer. That is, aside from Gohan, whose mind is only on the prone form of Piccolo lying across from him. Mr. Piccolo was his mentor, his friend, and now with him gone and the Namekian Dragon Balls inert, he is lost forever. This thought, and many like it for his other friends, is too much for the young hybrid to bear, and so as lightning strikes around him and the very planet begins to shake, he lets out a pain, protracted scream. While around him, a golden aura ignites. With this change in aura comes a change to Gohan himself, as his hair becomes golden and his eyes are cyan, meaning he has become the legend. He has become the Super Saiyan. Wasting no time, Gohan lunges at Frieza, ignoring his father's cries to be careful, and Vegeta's gasp that this is impossible, as they are immaterial now, as he can now feel that same righteous anger that gave Piccolo the strength to defeat Nappa. All that matters is hurting Frieza, no more than that, killing him. In his hubris, Frieza does not think much of this, doubting a mere child could hurt him, that is until the first punch lands. Coughing up blood, the Emperor attempts to write this off as a lucky hit, though as more and more just like it piston down on his midsection, expelling both his air and the contents of his stomach further, he is forced to accept that this really is the Super Saiyan of legend. As terror grips the tyrant's heart, he attempts next to reason with Gohan, banking on the monkey's instinct to crave a challenge by claiming that he is not even at 50% of his full power yet. However, unlike his father or Vegeta, Gohan doesn't care, his rage blinding him to everything else as he lays into this monster with more intensity. Finally, when he feels that Frieza has been made to suffer enough for his crimes, or rather that the punching is no longer satisfying, he readies a Masenko to finish him off. Though as he does, Frieza uses this brief window to launch a counterattack in the form of a death ball. Clashing in midair, the two attacks press against each other, though to the surprise of everyone, Frieza slowly begins to gain ground, as if the tyrant's will to survive is pushing it forward. Gritting his teeth, Gohan tries to push back, but even as a Super Saiyan, with everyone cheering him, he is not strong enough. Or rather, he is not strong enough alone. As in the perfect synchronous moment when he needs the extra power, a second yellow beam intertwines with Gohan's, the death ball slowing considerably. Looking back, the boy sees Pigero having read his mind, his expression set as he focuses on adding all his power to Gohan's, having recognized through this trip that he only attained it all because of this boy. So when he sees the younger child looking, he gives him a nod, a simple gesture, but one that means the absolute world to Gohan, as it speaks to the strength of their bond, and that all is forgiven for what happened back on Earth. As with these twin revelations, the two partners' key seems to resonate powerfully, so now with that weight off his shoulders and the power of a friend giving him strength, Gohan lets out one final scream. And as he does, the combined Best Bros Masenko doubles in size from the boost of their bond, blowing the death ball back at high speed to slam into Frieza, as both attacks blast the Emperor far, far away to hell, hopefully. But that's where we'll be leaving this story off for right now. I really hope you all enjoyed this part, as it was admittedly a little hard for me to write since the changes Pigero have introduced being number 1, an additional strong Earthling in the early arcs of Z, and number 2, a reminder for both heroes and villains for the value of teamwork. We had a lot to juggle with this part in the Namek arc. Also, for those of you keen enough to notice this, it's also the point at which the first What If relay, which you guys might have been introduced to Pigero for the first time, a lot of you at least, where all filler was canon, that was basically where the use of Pigero in the Namek arc kind of ended, was around this point. So we kind of somewhat mirrored it in how this story depicted it in some key ways, since I plan to use it more meaningful, or just the kind of the character more meaningfully going forward than we did in that original relay. Which should be fun, so I can tell you now, androids will not only be really exciting, but surprising, since the heroes aren't the only ones able to draw power from the realm of lucid canon. So that said, a huge shout out to Piccolo for helping me actually work out the script. This is actually the first script in the Pigero series that I actually didn't do all myself, and to Val for the rest of the pre-teen Pigero renders you got to see so far. With our final shout outs of the video, of course, going to the wonderful channel members and patrons. This video will be going out too early, or at least far earlier than the regular YouTube viewers, since those guys are still trying to fight off the Light Go on part 1 of this series. Dominique, Pizza15X, Aaron Winters, Normandy 1998, Xiao Pai, Coder SV3, Ronan Charizard, Daniel Smith, Drax, Dylan Wolfdog 31, Infernate Beast 326, J Ray, Johnny, Narku, Omar Cousin, Snow Slash Memes and more, Stephen Norton, Taryn, The Shadows, Vegeta What Ifs, Alamancer, B, Blood Down, Lyman Rogers, Omar Muhammad, Akko, Tay, Inebriated, John Sullivan, Trent Rouse, Dark Shadows, Pokemon Trainer Cam, River Joy, Elijah Edwards, Mr. Hamtastic, Jesus is King, Half an Onion, Angel Gonzalez, David Spalding, Lil T 910, Flyer B, Joseph Lau, Blaze 9526, Trainer Rad 164, Luca Reynolds, Baron Stormblade, Panda Walk 301, Ono, Chris Macriano, Lily, Simroth, Red Violet, DeAndre, Gerald Smith, Luxu, and John Self. As always, your direct support of the channel means a ton and enables me to do stuff like commission artists, actors, or editors to speed up and improve video productions and quality. And you can join their ranks or support for free if you have not already by making sure you're always leaving likes and comments, as well as just sharing the content. Actually, if those guys would do it on part 1, we'd probably be past that like goal by now. But for now, be sure to take care of yourselves and the world around you, and as always, go beyond plus ultra. And I'll see you guys next time.